views and opinions in the following program remain those of the producer and in no way reflect the views and opinions of Medford Community Cablevision, its board of directors, management, or other affiliates.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Protect Our American Way of Life. It only takes common sense. This is a very, very special show. Since the debates, presidential debates and the vice presidential debate first started, had more and more people have been jumping on board and want to help or have their 2 cents put in and so on and so forth. We've had several people that have been out there, an awful lot of them women, and both younger and older women are out there asking questions, getting answers, asking people what they think about this, that, or the other thing to debate, what are their top priorities, and so on and so forth. And before I get into those, there's a few things that I want to read that hopefully will set the record straight about some of the things about what's going on and the things that you've been hearing on TV from President Obama are just not there. I consider this the most important show ever done because hopefully, even if it only informs one person to make an intelligent decision on the presidency and how our country is going to go in the next 4 years, then I'll be happy. Now, something that I think is very important, and this tells a story about why President Bush, the younger, was so bad at the end of his term. Now, the day the Democrats took over was not January 22nd, 2009, when Barack Obama was sworn in as president. It was actually January 3rd, 2007, the day the Democrats took over the House of Representatives and the Senate. At the very start of the 110th Congress, that's when things started to change. The Democratic Party controlled the majority in both chambers for the first time since the end of the 103rd Congress in 1995. Now, for those who are listening to the liberals propagating the fallacy that everything is Bush's fault, think about this. January 3rd, 2007 was the day the Democrats took over the Senate and the Congress. At the time, the Dow Jones closed at 12,621. The GDP for the previous quarter was 3.5%. The unemployment rate was 4.6%. Looks like George Bush's economic policies were doing pretty good because they set a record of 52 consecutive months of job growth. Now, remember that day, January 3rd, 2007. That was the day that Barney Frank took over the House Financial Services Committee. Christopher Dodd took over the Senate Banking Committee. The economic meltdown that happened 15 months later was in what part of the economy? Banking and financial services. Unemployment went crazy. Now, this crisis cost us $5 to $6 trillion of toxic loans on the economy from your Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac fiascos, and don't forget AIG. Now, President Bush asked Congress 17 times in that period while he was still president to stop Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Starting in 2001, it was financially risky for the U.S. economy, and that was his argument, and it looked like he was right. But since 2001, that's when he started begging them virtually to stop Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. By the way, the third highest payoff from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, oh yes, I forgot to tell you, Barney Frank and Christopher Dodd received large amount of campaign contributions from these institutions. The third largest was from Senator Barack Obama. My God. And Barack Obama is also the man who fought against reform of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Obama and the Democrat Congress. And notice I don't say Democratic because they're no longer Democratic. And for newcomers to my show, I say every time, I used to be a Kennedy Democrat. And they say, why did you leave the Democratic Party? And I've been saying this for at least 10 years. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. They left me. Okay? So when someone tries to blame Bush, remember, January 3rd, 2007, the day the Democrats took over. Now, budgets did not come from the White House. I think most people realize that. They come from Congress, and the party that controlled Congress in January 2007 is the Democrat Party. Furthermore, the Democrats controlled the budget process for 2008 and 2009, as well as 2010 and 2011. In that first year, they had to contend with George Bush, which caused them to compromise on spending when Bush somewhat belatedly got tough on spending increases. So they had to, meet him partway, but they still got most of their way. But through 2009, though, Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid bypassed George Bush entirely, passing continuing resolutions to keep government running until Barack Obama could take office. At that time, they passed a massive omnibus spending bill to complete the 2009 budget. Budgets, I might add, plural. The last time the Senate authorized a budget to be passed, that was in 2009, by now it's a little more than 1,100 days that there has been no balanced budget by the Democrats or President Obama. 3 years in a row, by the way, Paul Ryan put together, and by the way, Paul Ryan, for those of you who don't know or may not be sure, he's long been considered a genius at setting budgets and a fiscal genius at money matters. And where was Barack Obama during this time? He was a member of that very Congress that passed all of those massive spending bills. And he signed the omnibus bill as president to complete 2009. If the Democrats inherited any deficit, it was the 2007 deficit, the last of the Republican budgets. That deficit was the lowest in 5 years, and the fourth straight decline in deficit spending. After that, Democrats in Congress took control of spending, and that includes Barack Obama, who voted for the budgets. Don't forget, he has added $6 trillion to our deficit with his constant deficit spending. And the bad part is that he's actually borrowing money from China to spend needlessly. If Obama inherited anything, he inherited from himself. In a nutshell, what Obama is saying is, I inherited a deficit that I voted for, and then I voted to expand that deficit fourfold since January 20th, 2009. And I hope some of you people out there will start thinking about those things. Now, there's something else that should be put out there, and this came from the Heritage Foundation. And there's 5 ways President Obama disappointed at the United Nations. And he actually scrapped his original speech outline to focus on the controversial YouTube video that many have suggested sparked recent anti-American attacks in the Middle East, including the one in Libya that killed our U.S. ambassador and 3-4 other Americans. Making this video the focus of his speech was inappropriate, but he did it. He should have used the international platform to make an unapologetic case for freedom. He's constantly apologizing for the United States. The president failed the American people and America's allies in 5 major ways. First of all, he failed to give a robust defense of free speech. That's the foundation of our very country. Free speech, freedom of speech. Oh boy. He ripped over the YouTube video that was offensive to the Muslims, and he apologized if it offended anybody. The president seemed to validate other countries, and he validated the other countries' disregard for freedom of speech. Again, the very foundation of our country. But the first thing that he said, and this made my heart sink, and I felt embarrassed, Father President. First thing he said when he got on television in the Rose Garden was saying, I apologize for any Muslims who were offended by the video. Didn't say our hearts go out to the families of those that were killed. Had to say, he had to apologize once again. Well, I promise you, Mr. President, there are millions of us here in this country that are not apologizing for that. And by the way, nobody has ever apologized for 9/11. And I'm talking about the first one in 2001, let alone this one here. But I know that not all countries in this body share this particular understanding of the protection of free speech. We recognize that, but in 2012, at a time when anyone with a cell phone can spread offensive views around the world with the click of a button, the notion that we can control the flow of information is absolute. The question then is, how do we respond? In other words, there's nothing we can do about somebody that, without violating the Constitution, about somebody who chose to put something on TV, haven't the faintest idea what the heck, why we're apologizing for anything. You know, and by the way, let me get back to the debate of the other night. It seemed that Mitt Romney was bushwhacked by the whole debate by that woman, Candy, who may have tried, I don't know, it didn't look like she tried very much. She gave Barack Obama 4 minutes more time over the course of the hour and a half than she did to Mitt Romney, interrupted Mitt Romney many times, wouldn't let her finish a few times, but she then went ahead and let Barack Obama continue to go past his time to make his point, whatever. And when Mitt Romney said that you did not go on and say that this was a terrorist attack, he said, yes, I did. And Romney said, no, you didn't. And he said, yes, I did. And he told her to roll the tape or look at the video or something like that. Now, how in the world is a moderator supposed to appear to be unbiased and yet have that thing already ready to go on the run? And what Obama did say was, he says, we will not condone an act of terrorism. An act of terrorism does not define this as being a terrorist attack. And he can say all he wants, the whole country heard it. He would not even admit that this was a terrorist attack. Kept on saying, we need more information, we need more information. Donald Rumsfeld, who has held more top-level positions in the government, from security advisor, he was on the President's Committee, President Bush, as a matter of fact, both President Bushes. He was Secretary of State, and so on and so forth. But he knows every bit of the inner workings of the White House and the chain of commands. And he came on television and said, there's no way that Barack Obama and everybody at his top level would not have known about that attack within minutes. And yet Barack Obama, as President of the United States, is claiming all these crazy things. He also admonished people for offending others, saying the future must not belong to those who slander the prophet of Islam. Yet to be credible, those who condemn that slander must also condemn the hate we see when the image of Jesus Christ is desecrated, churches destroyed, or the Holocaust is denied. My God. But Obama doesn't care about that segment of the USA. That's very, very evident. The president probably thought he was being clever, turning the argument around on those calling for restrictions on free speech. But it would not be surprising if there were a number of nodding heads in the audience agreeing that all such incitement should be banned. Okay, ban it wherever you want, but not in the United States and doing away with freedom of speech. This administration, this president, has gone on disregarding our U.S. Constitution too many times. We can't let it keep on going. You know, the comment could and probably will be interpreted as a backhanded endorsement of efforts to restrict free speech, like the defamation of religions, the resolution offered by the Organization of the Islamic Conference in the UN and the Human Rights Council. Beware of the UN and anything that's going on in the UN. You know, President Obama is not meeting with any other world leaders during his time at the UN, though he finds time to put in appearances on David Letterman's show and on The View. Can't figure that out. And by the way, going back to his talk on the Rose Garden the day after 9/11, as soon as he finished his talk, he flew off to Las Vegas. My God. You know, by the way, this is all put out by the American Heritage Foundation. And one of their experts, Brett Shaver, responded that President Obama spent less time defending free speech than he did outlining a vague vision for a world with tolerance and diversity as its key ideal. Perhaps this lopsided emphasis sought to reinforce the administration's dubious claim that only hateful speech is to blame for the attacks on our embassies. Anybody with a brain knows that wasn't the case. This is an out-and-out terrorist attack. But the overall effect was to lend credibility to the action that governments should be policing speech. By the way, Barack Obama said that since he put an end to Osama bin Laden, that was the end of Al-Qaeda. The reason he never talks about a terrorist attack is he can't admit that there are terrorists that are still around, because that would totally decry all his Al-Qaeda is dead statements. And by the way, he's taken that out of all his speeches now. He takes Al-Qaeda out completely, doesn't talk about them one way or the other. But he used to keep on saying, among my accomplishments, Osama bin Laden is dead and Al-Qaeda is no more. Well, we all know that's not the case. He gave the Muslim Brotherhood $2 billion, and that's every year. He gives them $2 billion, and what do? They expand around the globe and make it easier to bomb our embassies. And by the way, our embassies are U.S. soil. Now, back in 2001, and by the way, through the George W. Bush campaign, I call him President Bush the Younger. Through his entire administration, I didn't agree with a lot of things. There were some of the things he did, some of the things I didn't agree with. But one thing that I agreed with, and I am eternally grateful to him, is he did something about the terrorist attacks on our soil. And he said there will be no more terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, and there aren't, at least not while he was around. And he said, when he declared his war on terror, you may recall, he said, any country that harbors terrorists will be our target. And the first ones he went after was the Taliban in Afghanistan. They went right over to Iraq. And people said, why did he go to Iraq? There's no terrorists there. Well, come on, wake up and smell the coffee. And then they said he had no right there because they didn't find any weapons of mass destruction. Well, gee whiz, Saddam Hussein killed over 1 million of his own countrymen with gases and everything. He had weapons of mass destruction. He said he had weapons of mass destruction. He repeated it many times, and he refused 18 times. The UN sanctioned him for not complying with the UN resolutions, and they kept on sanctioning him, and after 18 times, President Bush the Younger said, that's enough. We're going to protect our country. If the UN isn't going to do anything and work with us, we'll do it on our own. And he went over, and a number of our allies agreed. And by the way, a lot of our allies are being attacked overseas by terrorists, and we're helping out with that too. So I am eternally grateful, thankful to President George W. Bush the Younger for having stepped forward and protected our American way of life, protected our American soil. Now, ever since then, All Democrats that I've talked to have said, yeah, but there'll be more, and there never were until just a month and a half ago when they attacked our embassy. Our embassy in Libya is American soil. That was an act of war. But unfortunately, President Barack Obama had to go off to Las Vegas to keep some commitments out there to raise funds. So that was the end of that. Now, instead of free speech, the Obama administration has had a policy of apologetic speech. The administration supported UN anti-blasphemy resolutions last year that threatens freedom of speech by condemning any expression that could be deemed defamation of religion. By the way, the only religion that he's worried about defaming is the Muslim religion. The president's words yesterday continued this week, and his apologetic stance continued. He tiptoed around Iran. Good God, man, you can't keep on tiptoeing around Iran. Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad will speak to the UN today, but he's already made his position quite clear this week. He said this week Iran has escalated threats against Israel and the United States, and the Obama regime has said that Israel should be eliminated. Israel should be eliminated. I'll repeat it. That's what he had to say, the president of Iran. And also that a new order should emerge without the U.S. as a superpower. Okay, your choice, pal, but everybody out there understand it. This is un-American. It's not un-American. It's anti-American. So let's stop sending them money at the very least, President Barack Obama. Stop sending them money. You're sending them money as if they were your own family. Well, maybe they are. In response, the president made a milquetoast statement, said Heritage's Neil Gada, projecting a dangerous lead-from-behind mentality at a time when the free world needs bold U.S. leadership. For some of you people out there that don't realize it, or don't even think about it or consider it a bad thing, the U.S. is the world leader. We're able to do this by our great economy. Hopefully it will come back again. The only saving grace is that the rest of the world is in worse shape than we are. Okay? And China has a great economy, but it all depends on the U.S. economy. So they're walking a tightrope. But security, the sovereignty of the United States is being given up time and time again by President Barack Obama. And our military is our strength. We keep a strong military, and the rest of the world doesn't want to mess around with us. And we're allowed to, we have the strength to go out and help defend our allies. If we keep on disregarding our allies, pretty soon nobody's going to want to be our ally. And I've got news for you. If we are pushed out of the loop, somebody is going to step in to take our place, to fill the vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum. And we have to hold that position by a strong military. Barack Obama fought for 3 years to he wanted to cut the military budget in half. Okay? And he finally made a compromise, he says, and he only cut it 47, instead of cutting it 50%, he only cut it 47%. He considers that a compromise. And by the way, in that same period of time, China tripled their defense spending. Wake up and smell the coffee out there. The president continues to pay lip service to diplomacy with Iran when the time is clearly past for this approach. Diplomacy be damned. He failed to give Israel strong backing. That's unheard of. Heritage's Gada lamented that yet again Barack Obama drew moral equivalence between the Israelis and the Palestinians, a theme he has frequently expounded upon since taking office. Palestine continues to edge its way into UN organizations, pursuing statehood without negotiating with Israel. People are forgetting that land is Israel's. It was given to them by the UN in 1948. and something else people don't seem to remember. Palestine was at war with the United States. They lost the war. They were, when I say they were at war with the United States, they sided with the Axis, okay? And so that's how they wound up losing their land. Not to mention a couple of wars in '67, the Six-Day War and everything, and the UN wants Israel to give back the land that they lost to, Egypt lost to Israel, and so on and so forth. The president should have taken a hard line against this. Instead, he made U.S. support for Israel, America's steadfast ally in the Middle East, a mere footnote in his speech. He did not promote economic freedom. Good God. That's the only countries that do not promote economic freedom are communist countries. And by the way, while we're at it, speaking about that, you notice he has 36 czars out there that they respond. And by the way, none of these quote-unquote czars was confirmed by the Congress or the Senate. He just threw them in there. Now, the joke is, people say, why do they call them czars? Because every single one of them, possible exception of one, the CEO of General Electric, who was very close to President Obama. And by the way, they don't pay any taxes, okay? All the rest of them have strong communist ties. So that's the joke. That's why they're called czars, and they're rich with giving away the country. Harris experts said ahead of the speech that President Obama should call for a new era of economic liberalization to expand economic freedom around the globe and ensure that the opportunities of a globalized and interdependent world economy are available to all citizens. This is the key to raising people out of poverty and giving them alternatives to joining radicalized groups. However, the Obama administration has failed to increase economic freedom at home or to promote it. He just, economic freedom means lower taxes, less government. There are certain inalienable rights. There are certain inalienable premises that cannot be denied. It's like gravity. You can't deny it. Throw the apple up in the air, it's going to fall down. One of them is more taxes mean less jobs. Now, President Obama the other night said his plan called for decreasing taxes $1.5 trillion. Well, gee whiz, Joe Biden went on there 2 different times and said, everybody is accusing the Obama administration of wanting to raise taxes $1.5 trillion. He said, well, guess what? We are. And I believe him. Everything calls for a raising of taxes. Less jobs, plain and simple. The other one is the more government, the bigger governments you have, the less jobs you have. Plain and simple. More government, less freedom, less jobs. So somebody's got, by the way, talk about big government. There's over 22.5 million people now work for the government. By the way, that's a total cost of $2.7 trillion per year. And by the way, that does not include those that get paid by government grants. So are you happy with Obama's way of doing things? And last of all, he failed to project American strength. The United Nations General Assembly is an odd place where oppressive dictators are given the same platform as free nations. How do you do that? Oppressive dictatorships should be slapped down or at least admonished by the UN. There's a unique opportunity to remind the world why people risk their lives to come to America and to recommit to protecting the freedom that make that risk worthwhile. I'll repeat that. It's a unique opportunity to remind the world why people risk their lives to come to America. My grandparents did. My mother was born in Greece. When things got so bad, my grandfather packed up all the women and his two brother-in-laws who were priests in the Greek church and sent them all to America. We should never allow the UN or anyone to abuse the mantra of human rights, to undermine our sovereign constitutional system, which not only protects our God-given rights and the liberty to govern ourselves, but also offers the best model for others to do the same. The liberty to govern ourselves is sovereignty. The United States is a sovereign state. The whole 50 states are sovereign states. I wrote an article, ironically, it was 2 or 3 months before 9/11 in 2001, that said the sovereignty of the states and the USA is under attack. And it's constantly been under attack, our sovereignty. You'll see more about it. Right now, we're so close to the election, I don't want to raise something else for you to worry about, but look up Agenda 21, and you'll see it's easily working its way toward making the UN the world voice for the country and subrogating the U.S. Constitution, and that should never be allowed. No American should speak apologetically about America, and that's what everybody, well, that's what all the left-wing liberals are doing, and nobody should speak apologetically about America, plain and simple, especially not the presidents. Well, I hope people are getting something out of this. But I've got, my God, that there was something else. And then I'm going to get to all the points that all the people have made in the past week or two, especially in the last 3 days since the last election. But this is important, and it just came out. The Catholic bishops have called Joe Biden a liar on Obamacare. Obamacare, the leaders of the Vice President's church, now don't forget, Joe Biden declared himself as a Catholic. The leaders of the Vice President's church are calling him out for denying the Affordable Care Act, that's Obama's care, their threat to religious liberty, and the institution to provide needed social services. As was noted in a post-debate analysis, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, known as the USCCB, were not amused with Joe Biden's other great debate lie, that Obamacare does not threaten religious liberty or the ability of churches, particularly the Catholic Church, to put their faith in action. On October 12th, the USCCB denounced, the Conference of Catholic Bishops, they denounced the Vice President's deceptive comments, noting that the so-called HHS exemption is a farce that unconstitutionally defines what a religious institution is and what government will allow it to do. Can you imagine somebody's defining what a religious institution is? That exemption is the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops states. They state that this does not extend to Catholic social services, Georgetown Hospital, Mercy Hospital, any hospital, as Biden claimed, or any other religious charity that offers to service to all, regardless of the faith of those served. Now, in other words, Joe Biden, a Catholic himself, he lied. As Paul Ryan, who is also a Catholic, put it to Joe Biden, the Obama administration was infringing upon our first freedom, the freedom of religion, by infringing on Catholic charities, Catholic churches, and Catholic hospitals. If that weren't so, Ryan said, after one of Biden's 82 interruptions, why would they keep suing you, Vice President Biden? Why are they constantly suing the Obama administration? This was a reference to a series of suits filed against the Obama administration by a wide variety of high-profile Catholic organizations, including the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., and the University of Notre Dame. As Cardinal Donald Wuerl, Archbishop of Washington, recently said on Fox News Sunday, they object to what they consider the unprecedented attempt by the Obama administration to define what a church and religious institution is. The Obama administration is defining, redefining what a church and religious institution is. My God. The notion that you're a church if the government, in Soviet fashion, says you're a church. If they say you're not a church, if Obama says you're not a church, you're not a church. That's the way they do it in the Soviet Union. Embedded in the mandate is a radically new definition of what constitutes a religious community, what constitutes religious ministry. Cardinal World said, brand new, never before applied at the federal level, that's what we're arguing about. This is a conflict with huge electoral implication. Catholic voters make up 26% of the U.S. population and 29% of U.S. voters. George W. Bush won 52% of the Catholic vote versus John Kerry's 47% in 2004. Barack Obama won 54% of the Catholic vote in 2008. And I'm ashamed to say I was one of them that voted for Barack Obama. A significant 7-point shift that greatly helped his election. And I'm sorry to say I'm not happy with the last 3 years and 9 months under President Barack Obama. We don't deserve it, what's happening to us, and we should not put up with it for another 4 years. The secular media either ignore the issue or say Catholic fears are unfounded. Well, last week, Laurel Brogen of Ontario, Canada's Minister of Education, told reporters that under its new anti-bullying law, Bill 13, the Accepting Schools Act, Catholic schools will no longer be permitted to teach that abortion is wrong. My God, is that an infringement on our religion? We do not allow, and we're very clear with the passage of Bill 13, that Catholic teachings cannot be taught in our schools. That violates human rights, and it brings a lack of acceptance to participation in schools, she told the Pro-Life Religious Liberty website. How long before this happens here? The Council of Bishops mused. How long before it comes here? Long ago, the Council of Bishops issued a letter saying they will not comply with the mandate requiring contraceptive coverage by all religious institutions or face crippling fines. They want to fine the Catholic institutions. It is, in their view and ours, an assault on the First Amendment's guarantee of freedom of religion. But by the way, people forget that freedom of religion is also the First Amendment. Our First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech and freedom of religions. That's what brought the original colonists to America in the 1600s. They recently conducted the Fortnight for Freedom, an exercise in religious freedom from the pulpit in which they urged Catholics to vote their faith. The Council of Bishops says, according to Joe Biden, they said Joe Biden hasn't voted his faith and has lied about the consequences of Obamacare's implementation for religious liberty. Our vice president has lied. What a revolution. Unbelievable. President Obama lies constantly. And the reason he lies is because he can't fall back on his accomplishments. So the only thing to do is to savage and ravage the opponents and make up lies about them constantly. If voting Catholics exercise what fellow Catholic Nancy Pelosi, my God, she mockingly called this conscience thing, Obama and Biden are in deep electoral trouble. If the Catholics exercise their right to vote, and can you imagine Nancy Pelosi called it a conscience thing? It's freedom of religion, Nancy Pelosi, and I'm not happy with any of that. And by the way, anybody who does want to get involved in this discussion, please do. We'll take calls. You see them on right on the screen. You know, another thing that was brought out, and this is one of the women, actually, no, one of the women, it's 5 of the women that were out, you know, polling the people and getting there's some very knowledgeable women out there. And Christina Palmer, for one, and Anita Dunn, who was the communicating director, complained about lower pay for women in the Obama White House. They both worked for the Obama White House, and Anita Dunn was the communications director. It says on the White House staff, women are paid about 18% lower than men. And Valerie Jarrett, who we will hear more about, her name is coming up more and more. Barack Obama does not make a move without Valerie Jarrett, who is she's long been communist. Her father-in-law was a great, he was a communist and he was a writer. And Barack Obama studied under Valerie Jarrett's father-in-law all through his teen years. And Valerie Jarrett, she's one of the few people that's allowed to call President Barack Obama by his first name. They dine constantly. He doesn't make a move without her. As a matter of fact, it's been stated that when Osama bin Laden was finally caught up with and killed, it was the 4th time that President Obama was attempting to do it. The first 3 were in the works, and Valerie Jarrett said, no, not right now. It's not politically expedient. And Barack Obama said, yes, ma'am. Well, Valerie Jarrett is now the spearhead of the so-called war on women that the Republican Party is supposedly conducting. She's spearheading this whole thing, and she did nothing about it. She would not get involved in this thing at all. And so both Christina Palmer and Communications Director Anita Dunn in the Obama White House, they both resigned. Now, going over to Mitt Romney. I started to call him President Romney. But going over to Governor Mitt Romney, he has always searched for qualified women. Now, it was said that he said binders of women. It was binders of resumes of qualified women, women who qualified for top posts when he was governor. And by the way, don't forget, Mitt Romney had a woman as his lieutenant governor. His chief of staff was also a woman. Okay, so that baloney about the war on women is a lot of bunk. President Obama is leading women to think that Romney will cut cancer screening, contraceptives, family assistance. It's a big lie. He's not going to cut any of them. He just says those things should be turned over to the states. And that's one of the ways he's cutting the federal deficit, turning it over to the states, and the individual states. And I've said it for years and years. And he's not going to try to overturn, he's never said he wants to overturn Roe v. Wade, which never should have got there, in my opinion, never should have got there to the Supreme Court anyway. It should be a matter for the states. But at any rate, many top spokeswomen have said it's insulting to women voters to portray them as mindless idiots who need the government to take care of their contraceptives and their health and everything else. They are thinking of jobs, the economy, gas prices, food prices, and that's all they're really thinking about. They're not worrying about this other thing, contraceptives and all. So there is no war on women by the Republicans, and it's quite the opposite. When the Republicans take care of the economy, take care of jobs, then there's going to be more jobs for the women. I think there are 3.5 million women, more women today in the last 3.5 years that are out of jobs. And I think that, my God, I have the figures someplace that some of these women got. But these women that I'm talking about that do pay attention to what's important, they find it insulting. and hopefully this is going to show up at the elections in November. Big government. Barack Obama wants more and more and more big government. There's over 22.5 million people now work for the government. Total cost of $2.7 trillion, and that doesn't include, as I said before, those paid by government grants. Oh, more lies. Says Obama says 45.7 million people are uninsured. National Economic Council calculated 10.6 million actually are uninsured, and that includes illegal aliens. Obamacare it's nothing more than a total takeover of one of the largest industries in our country, the healthcare industry. That's what governments do. You take over the industry, and now you control it. Well, when I say that's the way governments, that's the way the communist governments do it. Okay? Take over the media. Take over the auto industry. Small business and middle class are the hardest hit, as a matter of fact, by Obamacare. 1,200 small businesses in California alone had to close up. Now, how are those small businesses, and I think they make up 48% of the middle class, how are they affected by Obamacare? How are they hurt by Obamacare? First of all, the cost of a person's health care for a year is $2,600. President his Obamacare cost $5,200. The small businesses cannot afford that. They either go out of business or they hire fewer people. Plain and simple. You know, we're constantly told by Barack Obama and Joe Biden and all of their honchos, they're constantly told that Mitt Romney says he's going to cut the deficit and he's going to, fix the economy and create more jobs, but he doesn't say how. Well, good God, man. He keeps saying it constantly how he's going to do it, and this is one of the ways he's going to do it, by doing away with Obamacare and going back to Medicare and Medicaid and restoring the $716 trillion that's, $716, you know something, now I'm not even certain. At least $716 billion a year that Obamacare has taken away from Medicare. Now, I want to get to some of the things on what these ladies out there, God bless them, I should start talking about the things. Obama failures seem to highlight what a lot of the people out there were saying. And Romney, at the debate, Romney's 2 consecutive good showings, not just one, he had 2 consecutive good showings. This is the consensus out there, the overwhelming consensus, as a matter of fact. And even by many people that said that they had voted for Barack Obama last time, they still said Romney's first presidential debate victory was so humongous that nothing that happened in the second debate could have changed any of that. And that was reflected in the polls, because all Obama did was call Mitt Romney a liar. Kept saying, no, that's not the truth, that's not the truth. Well, that's the same thing as saying you're a liar, and I'm embarrassed that that's the only thing that my president can say in his defense, that the other guy is a liar. He has to keep on saying that because he doesn't have a record of his own to fall back on. Now, one of the things is that the failures of Barack Obama were when he was running for president against Hillary Clinton, who totally got bushwhacked in that whole thing. He said he'd have unemployment down to 5.4%. Well, we all know that it's now, it's around 8%, give or take. He says now it's 7.8% instead of 8%. But that doesn't include all the many people who have totally dropped out of the workforce. The actual number is closer to 15% unemployment. There are 9 million less jobs, and maybe even more. And like I said, some people just stopped working. He said he would reform Medicare. Instead, he's virtually killed it with his Obamacare. The first year, he said he would have an immigration plan that would settle the entire immigration problem. By the way, I resent that term immigration. It's illegal immigration is a problem. We don't have a big problem with immigration. We have a problem with illegal immigration. President Obama said when campaigning, he said, in my first year, I will put forward a great plan that will fix the problem. He's walked away from it, let alone hasn't filed anything. It's just, non-mentioned. He said he would cut the deficit in half. Well, he's doubled it instead. It's just so unbelievable. He said he would create 5 million jobs. He even claims that he did create 5 million jobs. He's lost 5 million jobs. An awful lot of them have gone over to China. Now, getting back to those czars, the only one that I don't know for certain that he's not a communist, that has communist ties, is the gentleman, I think he was one of the last appointed czars last year. He was appointed the Jobs Czar, is what he called him. He's the CEO of General Electric, who once again pays no taxes, 0 taxes, okay? And the first thing that he did was he sent a contract of $2 billion or more to China to build the aircraft, the airframe. That should have gone to Boeing. Why didn't it go to Boeing, an American company? Well, at that time, Boeing was having problems with the unions. And, of course, Barack Obama would never want to alienate the union by giving their opponents a $2 billion contract, let alone it would bring in 80,000 new jobs. Unbelievable. 15 million or more people were on food stamps. Now it's up to 47 million people since Barack Obama took hold. He keeps on saying he wants to give everybody a fair shot. Well, you don't give people a fair shot by giving and giving and giving them things. What you're doing is suppressing them and keeping them from going out to look for jobs. There was an old thing, people said, what's the difference between a Republican and a Democrat? And it was said, a Democrat will see a starving man and give him a fish a day and says, you'll never starve again, just make sure you vote for me in November. The Republican will go to that starving man and teach him how to fish, and teach him how to teach his children how to fish. And then nobody will ever go hungry again. Now, the way you level the playing field, President Obama, is by creating jobs, by fixing the economy, and giving these people a chance to work their way out of the deficit that they're in. I'll call it the poor status, and allow them to work their way up at least into the middle class. But the dream will still be there, and the possibility will still be there for them to become billionaires, let alone millionaires. But with the Democrat plan, President Obama's plan, they will just stay home, watch Oprah, eat bonbons, and get fat and happy, and just sit and wait for their welfare checks to come in. I was in a discussion group a while back with 16 Harvard PhDs. One of them, as a matter of fact, 11 of them were black Harvard PhDs. And that comes into play here, and I'll tell you why. By the way, everybody that knows me knows I do not see color. Matter of fact, the fellow that invited me to it is a lifelong friend going back for high school. And he owns, it's Jack Miller, he owns the Bay State Banner, him and his brother. It's the largest black newspaper in the East Coast. At any rate, at one point, one of the gentlemen got up and he said, we perceive 18th and 19th century United States as being a certain way towards slavery. He says, how will we be perceived in 150 years? He said, I believe we will be perceived as having found the ultimate form of slavery, welfare. Just give them enough to keep them quiet, keep them fat, dumb, and supposedly happy. Don't encourage them to stay in school, get an education. Don't encourage them to stay off drugs. Don't encourage the little girls to not have babies out of wedlock. Don't encourage the little boys to not have sex with the girls and become unwed fathers. Don't encourage them to have two-parent families where a family is raised by a father and a mother. Just keep on throwing welfare at them. That is not, absolutely not, and nobody will ever, ever deny it. That is not giving them a fair shot. So shame on you, President Obama, for lying to those uneducated people who think that's a fair shot. And I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the 47% that President Obama claims that Mitt Romney doesn't care anything about. Mitt Romney cares about 100% of the people. What he said, and by the way, Barack Obama's claim was taken out of context. What Mitt Romney said was 47% of the people that are on welfare, and by the way, this does not include people that are on Social Security or veterans. 47% of the people that are on welfare are not going to listen to my message. I won't spend a lot of money trying to campaign to get their vote because they're going to vote for President Obama anyway. And also, Social Security is not welfare. And veterans funding for people that are on disability from war wounds and so on and so forth, that is not welfare. Social Security, we put money into Social Security all our lives. It was our insurance plan, and we're getting that money back. If we can ever get the Democrats from raiding our Social Security. Let me take this opportunity to say, everybody knows that China, we owe China more money than anybody else in the world. It's something like $3 trillion. But here's something that people don't know. We also, our second biggest debtor is the Social Security system. We owe them almost $2 billion. We owe ourselves almost $2 billion. And of course, Al Gore said, oh, we paid that all back. By the way, this is how the balanced budget came across under Bill Clinton. He counted that money as being an asset. And it wasn't. It was a liability. But Gore said, we've paid that back. All the IOUs are in a little black box in New Jersey. Well, you can't spend IOUs. You still owe the money. Stop raiding our Social Security system. Mitt Romney will stop raiding the Social Security system. There's something else that is another Obama failure. Gas prices have doubled. Food prices have skyrocketed. Now he said just the opposite. He said he was going to get the economy, fix the economy. Another thing, by the way, everybody wants to invest in gold. Well, the gold prices have skyrocketed, but it's not because the gold is really up. It's just the value of the dollar is down. A balanced budget. Barack Obama promised a balanced budget. Well, not only has he not signed a balanced budget, by the way, it's not up to him to make a budget, it's up to the Congress to propose a budget, get it passed by the House and the Senate, and then the president either accepts it or he vetoes it. Well, Paul Ryan, 3 years in a row, has put forward a bill as the congressman, has put forward not a bill, but a balanced budget. And President Obama has rejected it 3 times. Okay? But he's never put his own proposal forward. Historically, forever and ever, when a balanced budget by the opposite party is presented to the president, if he rejects it, he puts forward his own balanced budget plan. President Obama has not put any balanced budget together. I'm going to skip back down. I'm going to remind you a little bit about Jimmy Carter, because now Barack Obama is doing the same thing. Jimmy Carter could not run on his record. So and now President Obama cannot run in his record. So when you can't do that, you just savage the opponent. You just constantly attack his plans. You say that he is lying about this, he's lying about that, and so on and so forth. Or he hasn't put any proposal forward, even though he's constantly put the proposal forward. Well, that strategy cost Jimmy Carter the election. Hopefully, it will cost President Obama the election also. And you talk about taxes, my God. The UN is on the verge of taxing the internet. Did you know that? And you'll find out very shortly. But these issues are not being talked about. All we hear is this phony Republican war on women and so on and so forth. There's an awful lot of those women are pretty well ticked off. The president is spending, he's borrowing money to spend. Can you imagine that? He's either spending or borrowing, and he says it, and Joe Biden declares it, he will raise taxes by $1.5 trillion. Romney will not allow that if he's president. There's something else. Some of these women, some of the people out there, I won't say they were just women, but there was a large number of them were women, giving their opinions. They says, a strong economy and strong security of our country will have peace through strength. That's how you get peace in our country. There is no leadership now because Barack Obama leads from behind. He has said he leads from behind, and that's not what advisors tell him to do. But actually he does what the advisors tell him to do, and going back to Valerie Jarrett with her communist leadership there, lead from behind. But there's a few other things that I wanted to bring forward. Three of the people I've been told, I wish I had gone out with them, and I'm certainly going to start going out and doing it myself. They say President Obama constantly says Mitt Romney wanted to let the auto industry, General Motors, wanted to let them go bankrupt and lose all those jobs. Bankruptcy does not mean you close your doors. It gives you time to help you realign your business practices and get your house in order. But Obama says he saved Detroit. He didn't save Detroit. He just prolonged the bad business practices and, by the way, took over General Motors. You think he saved General Motors? Take a look at their stocks. As a matter of fact, the government, by the way, is buying all the cars. They're buying every one of the cars of General Motors to make this move a good one. But a lot of people feel, and I don't disagree, that taking over General Motors, don't forget, he now has control. You and I, as well as the president, own General Motors. He did that so he could take over General Motors to give their electric car technologies to China. Why didn't he just let them go, give them stimulus money to promote their electric cars in this country? China, by the way, constantly is stealing our technology, and this is one of the technologies that they've stolen. Again, take a look at General Motors stocks. They're down. Okay, Obama lied again about Romney sending jobs overseas to get tax breaks. He did it in the first debate, and he said, you're sending jobs overseas to China and every place else to get the tax breaks. There are no tax breaks for sending jobs overseas. Mitt Romney stated that, and President Obama didn't say, no, you're wrong, because he doesn't know. He's just saying what he's told to say. And well, can you imagine in the second debate, he said it again. You may recall in the first debate, Mitt Romney said, Mr. President, I've been in business for over 25 years. I haven't the faintest idea what you're talking about. Nobody gets a tax break when they send jobs overseas. Now, President Obama says he increased oil, natural gas, and coal production. That has to be one of the biggest lies I've ever heard. Now, he says in his tenure, oil imports are at their lowest. And he also said he's got a plan to lower gas prices. How is he going to lower gas prices when in the last 3.5 years he more than doubled gas prices? Well, he blames that on the administration before him. He said that President Bush, the economy was so bad his last 2 years in office that that's what caused the oil price to go down. Well, we already know that the last 2 years in his office, the last 2 years that President Bush was in office, the Congress and the Senate was overwhelmingly run by Democrats. President Obama's first 2 years in office was overwhelmingly Democrats in both the House and the Senate, yet he didn't get anything changed. And gas prices started skyrocketing again, so it had nothing to do with the economy from George Bush. He didn't inherit the economy from George Bush. He created the economy. He claims he wants new, safe energies to create jobs. Well, those new, safe energies are, well, okay, so he's going to do away with coal. West Virginia and parts of Virginia are going to go out of business. That's their leading industry, is coal. And so we'll see how that sits with him. He's certainly not going to do it. It's going to be a lot of solar energy. And by the way, let me take this opportunity to tell some of you people, and you look for it, okay? Harry Reid, home state, he's the senator from Nevada. He's proposing, and it's going to come through, a $2 billion, it might even be a $4 billion, it might be $2 billion a year, I'm not certain what, but it's a minimum of $2 billion for a solar energy plan in Nevada. It's going to be built by a Chinese company. And he's proposing that this Chinese company build it. And it was a little sidetrack, by the way. Harry Reid's son is a lawyer for this Chinese company. Come on, let's get it. And something else, and I'm sure that mainstream media never talks about this stuff, but you just look it up. Another thing, Google this up in any form that you like. China's deep sea exploration off the coast of Florida. President Obama is allowing China, without a whimper, to drill for oil off the coast of Florida, less than 60 miles off the coast of Florida. His claim is he's not doing it. He says this is Cuba's property, and they're going to drill on Cuban property, waterways, which is right next to the United States. And Cuba hired the Chinese company. And we all know what happened in 50 years ago in the Cuban crisis when a communist country was bringing in missiles into Cuba. President Kennedy stepped forward and says, "No dice, pal, we're not going to allow it." And by the way, I was in the Air Force Reserve at that time, and my outfit got called up, and we were this close to going. And then they backed off. Well, that was one president who had U.S. interest in party. He was a Democratic president. We don't have a Democratic president any longer. We have a president who's from the Democrat Party. And, you know, there's so many more things I can't. By the way, you know, 54% of small businesses pay taxes individuals. And this is, again, this is the people that were polled over the last week or so, all from around the Medford area. And 54% of small businesses pay taxes individuals. So why is President Obama pushing his Obamacare through the middle classes? These are middle classes, by the way. Okay, they find this more to their benefit because the businesses are being taxed at such a huge rate that these small businesses find it more economically feasible to file as private citizens. You know, and President Obama claimed that it was Romney's allies in Congress who won't sign his bill to save the economy. He says that the Republicans broke our economy. And he claims that the tax breaks for the wealthy broke our economy. Well, let me remind you, President Obama, the wealthy people are paying almost 60%, or excuse me, almost 45 to 50% of the taxes in this country. Not to mention, there are charities all over the country, and possibly around the world, but charities in the country under Obama's plan to tax the wealthy again, they're suffering from charitable campaign contributions. And Mitt Romney has given over 10% of his wealth every year. 10% of his money goes to charities. And President Obama, what have you given to charities? And by the way, President Obama has never had a job other than an elected job. And yet, he has a net worth of $17 million. How is that possible? Where did this come from? I'm not going to cast any serious aspersions, but Harry Truman said, and it was agreed upon by everybody in Congress and the Senate, Harry Truman once said, any man or woman who leaves public office with more money than they started with is a crook. I won't use the word crook, I'll just say something fishy that's maybe not a good American way of life. Okay? But the wealthy, their tax breaks did not break our economy. And by the way, this war on women that the Republicans are supposedly waging, in the last 3.5 years, there are over 3 million more women are out of work. And there's 58,000 more women in the last 3 years are among the ranks of the poor and the homeless. You know, it's just too much for me. President Romney said, we can't afford another 4 years. We don't have to live this way, and we shouldn't be living this way. But, you know, I was talking about Valerie Jarrett, and I want to read something to you about who Valerie Jarrett is. Okay? She's called the Obama's Rasputin. She's the radical behind the curtain. And she received, and this is right from the White House, by the way, she receives more protection than our Libyan ambassador did, and he calls the president by his first name, dines and vacations with the first family, and had the power to call off those 3 strikes against Osama bin Laden that I told you about. Ambassador Chris Stevens did not have a Marine detail in Benghazi, Libya, but White House senior advisor and Obama confidant Valerie Jarrett reportedly had a full Secret Service detail on vacation in Martha's Vineyard. And by the way, all of our embassies, the embassy in France has a full contingency of security about it, and pretty much all of our embassies. So why did not our Ambassador Chris Stevens, God rest his soul, have that? And of course, we all know that Martha's Vineyard is a serious threat to, Valerie Jarrett. And yes, I'm joking about that. I apologize. That's not usually my way. Jarrett seems to have a 24-hour, around-the-clock detail with 5 or 6 agents full-time. Democratic pollster Pat Caddell said in an interview recently with Breitbart News, if Stevens had a similar escort, he would most likely be alive today. By the way, this is coming from Pat Caddell. He is a Democrat. He's a Democrat pollster. He's up there, you know, and he's absolutely pro-Obama, but he stated the fact. Such protection isn't usually available to senior advisors, but Jarrett is no ordinary advisor. She almost always seems to be near the President and First Lady, and her name keeps popping up at key moments, indicating the power and influence she wields. Her influence is shown by an account in Richard Miniter's book, Leading from Behind. The Reluctant President, and by the way, these are 3 different books. Leading from Behind, The Reluctant President and the Advisors Who Decide for Him. It relates that at the urging of Jarrett, Obama canceled the operation to kill Osama bin Laden on 3 occasions, before finally approving the May 2nd, 2011 Navy SEAL mission. Okay, well, hopefully that will give you some confidence that I'm telling the truth and I'm reading from facts right from Washington, D.C. Seems she was concerned about the possible political harm to Obama if the missions failed. Miniter writes that the president canceled the kill mission in January of 2011, in February, and a 3rd time in March, and in each instance at the urging of Jarrett. Miniter cites a source within the Joint Special Operations Command who had direct, well, let me get this out here, had direct knowledge of the operation and its planning. Edward Klein, author of the best-selling book about Obama, The Amateur, the name of the book is The Amateur. It's written by Edward Klein. He once asked Obama if he ran every decision by Jarrett. And the president responded, absolutely. A former foreign editor of Newsweek and editor of the New York Times Magazine, Klein described Jarrett as ground zero in the Obama operation, the first couple's friend and consigliere. That's somebody who's in the know. Only Michelle has more influence over the president. It was Valerie Jarrett who pushed for the selection of self-avowed communist Van Jones as Obama's green job czar. Now, of Jones' appointment, she said, "We were so delighted to be able to recruit him into the White House. We were watching him, and really, he's not that old. For as long as he's been active out in Oakland and all the creative ideas he has. And so now we have captured that. And we have all that energy in the White House." Excuse me. You know, we had a few guests lined up on the telephone. We've been having, for all you people, I've been told that we get tons of people have been trying to call. For all you people who haven't been able to get through, we're having more problems with our telephones. Excuse me. On September 1, the Times ran a piece on Valerie Jarrett titled, "The Other Power in the White House." It told how she forced White House Chief of Staff Bill Daley out the door over the political implications of mandatory contraceptive coverage in Obamacare. How powerful must a person be to be able to do that, force a chief of staffer out the door of the White House? It tells you how much influence she has with President Obama. Daley was worried it would hurt the president among Catholics and others. Jarrett would ultimately outmaneuver not only Mr. Daley, but also the vice president in her effort to include the broadest possible contraception coverage in the administration's health care overhaul. So in a nutshell, you know, that might sound confusing to some people. When I was reading this past a couple of other people, that they said, say that in other words. Well, in other words, Chief of Staff Bill Daley, who has a lot of weight with the president, did not want to put the mandatory contraceptive coverage in Obamacare. Valerie Jarrett said, "Oh, yes, you will," and all the Catholic organizations are going to have to follow it. You know, Becker wrote, "The Iranian-born Jarrett, her parents were American-born expatriates, is the only staff member who regularly follows the president home from the West Wing in the residence, and one of the few people allowed to call the president by his first name. Her father-in-law, Chicago writer and TV commentator Vernon Jarrett, was an associate of noted communist Frank Marshall David, and Obama's mentor during his teen years. When Vernon Jarrett died in 2004, he was given a salute on the pages of People's Weekly, World, a house organ of the Communist Party, USA. And that's where Valerie Jarrett comes from. And please look it up yourself. Get on the internet and Google up these things. Google up all the czars, and you see they're all communist-inspired, and they were all appointed by President Barack Obama. Well, I just got the high sign. The show's over. The quickest hour I've been through. I hope I was informative, and I hope all you folks will take it all to heart. The name of the show is Protect Our American Way of Life, and my name is Jim Tuberosa. I hope we'll see you again.